It began with a single, heart-stopping alert on every royal watcher's phone. 3 words flashed across the screen. Breaking. Meghan. Hospital. The kind of news that makes your stomach drop before your brain even has a chance to process. For millions around the world, it was instantaneous panic, the sort that tightens your chest and forces your mind to race. What happened? How bad is it? Is she going to be okay? And yet, despite the flurry of messages, the rumors, and the whispered updates from those claiming insider knowledge, nobody truly knew the full story. Not yet. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine this: a palace steeped in centuries of tradition, corridors echoing with secrets, staff moving silently behind gilded doors. And then, in the midst of all this, a woman who has been both revered and reviled, suddenly lying vulnerable, hooked to monitors, a thin tube feeding her oxygen as doctors hover nearby. It's the kind of image that shocks even the most seasoned royal correspondents. But here's the catch: none of it had been officially confirmed, at least not at the moment the alert went live. And that's precisely what makes the next 48 hours one of the most nerve-wracking stretches in recent royal history. From the moment Meghan Markle first stepped onto the royal stage, her life has been a series of contrasts: adored and criticized, celebrated and scrutinized, praised for her courage and condemned for her choices. And now, facing a sudden, critical health scare in a hospital room somewhere behind the palace walls, every public and private moment of her past seemed to crash into focus. How did we get here? How could someone who had once dazzled the world with her charm, her style, her fearless advocacy, suddenly be fighting for her life, or at least teetering dangerously close to it? Let's pause here for a moment and consider the human element. Because in the midst of all the cameras, headlines, and relentless media speculation, it's easy to forget that Meghan Markle is, first and foremost, a human being. Behind the gowns, the public appearances, and the carefully curated Instagram posts, there is someone with fears, vulnerabilities, and the very real fragility of life. And when we think about her now, lying in a hospital bed, oxygen mask in place, surrounded by doctors and machines beeping a rhythmic, unnerving score, it's impossible not to feel the gravity of the situation, the helplessness that no amount of fame or wealth can erase. But let's rewind just a bit. To understand why the world erupted in panic at the mere mention of her hospitalization, we need to take a closer look at the pressures that have defined Meghan's life over the past decade. From the moment she began dating Prince Harry, her every move was scrutinized, every outfit critiqued, every word analyzed for hidden meanings. Social media turned into a battlefield, paparazzi into a relentless force, and even allies within the royal family were caught between loyalty, politics, and public perception. For someone like Meghan, who had spent her early life navigating the entertainment industry, these pressures were familiar yet magnified 1,000-fold. Consider the irony. A woman celebrated for her resilience, for her ability to speak truth to power, and yet now facing a crisis where she could do nothing but rely on others for her survival. It's a jarring contradiction, and it's precisely what makes the story so compelling. How do you reconcile the image of Meghan Markle, the confident, outspoken Duchess, with the image of Meghan Markle, fragile and gasping for breath under a hospital oxygen mask? And more importantly, what does this sudden vulnerability mean for those who have followed her journey so closely, cheering her victories and mourning her struggles? Early reports were fragmented, chaotic, and often contradictory. Some claimed she had been rushed to the hospital after experiencing severe respiratory distress. Others hinted at an ongoing, undisclosed illness that had worsened suddenly. Meanwhile, social media exploded with speculation, ranging from heartfelt concern to wild conspiracy theories. Every post, every tweet, every headline seemed to carry the weight of uncertainty. And in this swirl of information and misinformation, the world collectively held its breath. But what makes this story even more compelling is not just the immediacy of the health scare. It's the intricate web of relationships, power dynamics, and secrets that have always surrounded Meghan and the royal family. Each interaction, each meeting, each phone call carries layers of meaning, often hidden from public view. To understand the full impact of this hospitalization, real or dramatized, we have to consider the context, the years of tension, the moments of triumph and scandal, the private disputes that were never meant to be public. Every heartbeat in that hospital room echoes with a history that few outside the palace walls fully grasp. And while we are left grappling with questions about her current condition, there's also an almost unbearable suspense. What will the royal family do? How will they respond? For decades, the monarchy has been a master of managing perception, carefully curating every announcement and orchestrating every narrative. And yet, in this moment, the very image of control seems to be slipping. The public is watching, the media is watching, and behind closed doors, decisions are being made that could reshape the perception of the monarchy and Meghan's place within it, forever. Every second that passed after the alert felt like an eternity. News outlets scrambled to get updates. Royal experts debated endlessly about what might be happening, and millions of fans around the world sent messages of support, prayers, and anxiety. It was a collective moment of suspense and fear, amplified by the fact that no one knew the full story. And yet, the curiosity gap, the tantalizing sense that something shocking was about to be revealed, kept everyone glued to their screens, waiting for the next twist, the next development, the next piece of information that would make sense of the chaos. But here's the question that truly haunts this story. How did it come to this point? How did a woman who had once been the darling of Hollywood, the admired figure in global philanthropy, and a beloved duchess, find herself in a position where a single hospital alert could bring the world to a standstill? The answer lies not just in her personal choices, but in a complex interplay of fame, scrutiny, and relentless public attention. It's a cautionary tale about the costs of living under a microscope, about how even the strongest among us can be brought to moments of profound vulnerability. And just when it feels like we are beginning to understand, the narrative twists again. Sources inside the palace hinted at developments that were almost too shocking to believe. Private medical teams, urgent meetings between royal aides, sudden security protocol changes. All signs that this was not just another minor health scare. Something more significant, more dramatic, was unfolding behind those closed doors. And it's precisely this tension, the combination of fear, curiosity, and anticipation, that will carry us forward through every chapter of this story. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The hospital corridors were silent, but the silence was deceptive. It was the kind of quiet that made every footstep echo, that made the hum of the machines in the room feel louder than it should. Outside, the world didn't yet know the full extent of what was happening. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension, a mixture of fear, urgency, and the cold, mechanical efficiency of medical protocol. For Meghan Markle, lying on the hospital bed, each shallow breath was a battle, each beat of her heart a reminder of fragility in a life that had always seemed larger than life. Let's pause for a moment and picture this. The oxygen mask resting lightly over her face, the soft hiss of medical gases filling the air, the sterile smell that makes every hospital room feel both clinical and unreal. You might imagine her mind racing, thinking of Harry, of Archie and Lilibet, of the world outside that now seemed impossibly far away. Imagine the frustration of someone so used to control over her public image, control over her career, control over her narrative, now facing a situation where every element was entirely out of her hands. How would you cope, knowing that your health, your very life, depends entirely on others' expertise and timing? In these moments, details matter. The way the curtains flutter slightly from a distant air vent, the small, almost imperceptible clicks of a nurse adjusting a monitor, the subtle tension in the doctor's eyes when they glance at each other before speaking. These are the moments that define the human experience in crisis, small, almost mundane observations, yet laden with emotional weight. It's a reality that contrasts sharply with the public perception of Meghan, which has often been filtered through headlines, Instagram posts, and carefully staged appearances. Here, in this quiet hospital room, the veneer of celebrity melts away, revealing vulnerability that is universal, timeless, and deeply human. Meanwhile, the palace was already responding, though with cautious calculation. Royal aides moved quickly, almost invisibly, coordinating communications, managing staff, and preparing for the inevitable media storm. Every decision had to be weighed carefully. What could be said publicly, what must remain confidential, how to protect the privacy of the patient while simultaneously responding to global curiosity. In a way, the mechanisms of the monarchy were like a well-oiled machine, precise, disciplined, and unyielding. Yet even the most perfect machine falters under unforeseen pressure. And this is where the emotional stakes multiply. The world had been watching Meghan for years, celebrating her advocacy for women, her work with underprivileged communities, her outspoken stance against injustice. But the very qualities that endeared her to millions also made her a lightning rod for scrutiny and criticism. Now, as she faced a serious health crisis, the public response was almost instantaneous. Messages flooded in from every corner of the globe, celebrities expressing concern, fans sending virtual prayers, media outlets scrambling for any scrap of information. The digital landscape became a battlefield of empathy and sensationalism, where speculation often blurred with reality. It's important to consider the psychological impact of such a crisis. For someone who has lived under the microscope, every glance, every word, every gesture is magnified. The pressure can be suffocating. Imagine lying in that hospital bed, aware that millions are watching, that every update could be dissected, misinterpreted, or weaponized. How do you process fear when it is not private, when the world has a stake in your survival narrative? It's a question that few can truly answer, and yet it defines the intensity of the moment. The tension was compounded by whispers of internal discord. Within the palace walls, long-standing tensions between aides, advisors, and family members had only been exacerbated by this sudden crisis. Each decision, each step toward managing the situation, carried implications far beyond the hospital room. It was a chess game played at high stakes, where strategy and perception were as important as immediate medical care. And in this chess game, Meghan was simultaneously the pawn, the queen, and the most important piece on the board. A position of immense influence, yet terrifying vulnerability. As the hours stretched on, the public's imagination ran wild. What exactly was happening in that hospital room? How serious was her condition? Would she survive the night? Rumors multiplied with every passing minute, some grounded in observation, others entirely fabricated. Social media users posted images of hospitals, oxygen tanks, and medical monitors, suggesting they had inside knowledge, while celebrity news sites speculated endlessly. It was the perfect storm, an insatiable public, a woman of immense fame, and an event shrouded in secrecy. And at the center of it all, Meghan Markle's story unfolded in real time, though most of the world could only glimpse fragments. Yet amidst the chaos, there were also moments of profound humanity. A nurse quietly adjusting her blanket, a doctor offering a comforting word, a medical technician pausing to ensure she was as comfortable as possible. These small gestures often go unnoticed in the headlines, yet they form the backbone of the human experience in crisis. They are the subtle threads that weave together fear, hope, and care, and they highlight a truth that resonates far beyond celebrity. When confronted with vulnerability, the most ordinary acts of kindness carry extraordinary weight. But here is where the plot thickens. Just as the first signs of stabilization appeared, a slightly stronger breath, a pulse that seemed steadier, new information reached the palace, setting off a chain reaction of concern and urgency. There were hints of complications, unexpected variables in her medical condition that no one had anticipated. Specialists were called, tests were expedited, and the atmosphere in the hospital shifted from controlled calm to a heightened state of alert. Every heartbeat now carried dual significance, for her life, and for the way the unfolding narrative would be perceived by a watchful world. Meanwhile, the royal family was forced to make rapid decisions. Communication had to be strategic, deliberate, and precise. Any misstep could be magnified beyond control. It was a delicate balancing act. Providing reassurance without overpromising, maintaining privacy without appearing secretive, and navigating centuries-old traditions in a situation that none of them could have fully prepared for. Behind the scenes, aides worked tirelessly to draft statements, coordinate with medical teams, and manage public perception, all while attempting to maintain a sense of composure that could mask the intensity of the reality inside the hospital room. And as this high-stakes drama unfolded, one question haunted everyone. What would Harry do? The prince, known for his fierce loyalty and protective nature, was now faced with a dual burden, supporting Meghan while grappling with the pressures of public expectation. How does one remain present for a loved one in crisis, knowing that every decision, every reaction, will be scrutinized by a global audience? The tension between personal anguish and public duty created a maelstrom of emotion, one that threatened to engulf even the most seasoned members of the royal household. But just when it seemed that a fragile equilibrium had been achieved, the narrative took another sudden turn. Early morning reports hinted at an urgent intervention, a potential complication that could redefine the situation entirely. Specialists were convened, emergency protocols reviewed, and the hospital buzzed with the kind of intensity reserved for the most critical cases. Outside, the world speculated feverishly, piecing together incomplete information, while inside, the reality of the moment was far more complex, far more delicate, and far more dramatic than anyone could have imagined. And as the minutes ticked by, the suspense reached a fever pitch. Every beep, every whispered instruction, every shadow moving across the hospital room seemed laden with meaning. The drama was no longer just in the public's imagination. It was real, immediate, and terrifyingly unpredictable. And yet, even in the midst of fear and uncertainty, there was an undercurrent of hope, of resilience, of determination to navigate the crisis with skill and courage. But what came next would shock everyone. And not a single person could have predicted the twist that lay just beyond the horizon. The sun had barely begun to rise over London when the first real wave of panic rippled through the royal circles. News of Meghan's hospitalization had reached a point where whispers were no longer sufficient. Speculation had transformed into urgent messages, phone calls that rang incessantly, and hurried meetings behind closed doors. In the hushed corridors of the palace, aides and advisors moved like shadows, aware that every second counted, yet careful not to reveal the depth of the unfolding crisis. For Meghan, though, the world outside could not penetrate the surreal, tense reality of her hospital room. Each breath was a labor, each glance a reminder of the fragility she had never before fully confronted. The initial shock was compounded by the emotional isolation that accompanies serious illness. Even someone as surrounded by staff and loved ones as Meghan can feel profoundly alone in moments like this. She had spent years commanding attention, controlling narratives, and facing the world with a mixture of charm, determination, and courage. Now, stripped of control, her vulnerability was absolute. Imagine lying in that bed, hearing only the rhythmic hiss of oxygen and the faint hum of monitors, the world outside reduced to distant, urgent whispers. How does a person reconcile their sense of agency with the necessity of total dependence? It's a question few of us will face at this level of public scrutiny, yet it defined every heartbeat in that room. Outside, the palace had already begun to manage the inevitable media storm. Statements were carefully drafted and reviewed by multiple advisors. Every word mattered. A misplaced syllable could ignite speculation that spiraled into scandal. Meanwhile, the public's appetite for updates only grew. Social media feeds were flooded with conjecture, fan accounts shared unverified insider reports, and news networks interrupted their regular programming to discuss every fragment of information. And while the palace moved with practiced precision, the tension among staff, medical personnel, and family members was almost palpable. Behind the polished facade of control, human emotion ran raw and unchecked. To understand the gravity of Meghan's condition, one must also consider the extraordinary pressures she had faced over the previous decade. From the moment she entered the royal sphere, her life had been a balancing act of personal ambition, public expectation, and relentless scrutiny. Every interview, every public appearance, every charitable endeavor had been dissected in the court of public opinion. Praise and criticism arrived in equal measure, often in rapid succession. And yet, despite navigating these pressures with remarkable composure, nothing could prepare her for a situation like this. A moment where physical vulnerability collided with global attention, creating a tension that was almost unbearable. In the hospital room, small moments carried enormous weight. A nurse gently adjusted her blanket. A doctor paused, examining her charts with furrowed concentration. Every gesture, no matter how minor, was amplified by the stakes at hand. This was a world where a single misstep, a delayed treatment, an overlooked symptom, a misunderstood instruction, could have consequences far beyond the ordinary. And for Meghan, accustomed to exercising control over her environment, the necessity of trusting others in such an absolute way was both humbling and terrifying. But as the day progressed, new layers of complexity emerged. Early reports suggested potential complications in her condition, though the details remained closely guarded. Specialists were called in for consultations, tests were expedited, and the atmosphere in the hospital shifted from measured calm to high alert intensity. For those observing from the outside, the updates were fragmented, inconsistent, and often contradictory. Yet the true story, the one unfolding behind closed doors, was far more intricate and dramatic than anyone could imagine. Meanwhile, the palace faced an unprecedented dilemma. Historically, the royal family had relied on measured, deliberate communication strategies to manage crises. But in this instance, the combination of Meghan's status, public concern, and the urgency of the situation created a communication paradox. Speak too soon, and risk causing unnecessary alarm. Speak too late, and risk losing control of the narrative entirely. It was a delicate balance, requiring not just strategic acumen, but emotional intelligence, diplomacy, and an understanding of the public psyche at an almost surgical level. For Harry, the stakes were intensely personal. Known for his unwavering loyalty and deep emotional connection to Meghan, he was suddenly confronted with a scenario that tested both his composure and his resilience. Every decision, every reaction, would be scrutinized. Every word he spoke to advisors or the media could ripple across social networks, interpreted, misinterpreted, and amplified. And yet, amid this storm of external pressures, his primary focus remained steadfast: Meghan's well-being. But how do you maintain clarity, poise, and presence when your world has been turned upside down, when the person you love is fighting for her life under the harsh lights of a hospital room? The media frenzy added another layer of stress. Social platforms erupted with speculation. Headlines ranged from urgent breaking news alerts to sensationalized conjecture about the severity of Meghan's condition. Fans, celebrities, and commentators alike weighed in, contributing to a relentless tide of information that was both overwhelming and often misleading. In this maelstrom, the truth, nuanced, precise, and human, became almost impossible to discern. And that ambiguity only fueled anxiety, creating a feedback loop where uncertainty fed speculation and speculation intensified fear. Within the hospital, subtle tensions began to emerge among the staff. Differences of opinion on treatment strategies, conflicting assessments of patient stability, and the pressure of performing under intense scrutiny all contributed to a fragile dynamic. It was a high-stakes environment, where the margin for error was slim and the emotional load was immense. Every action had the potential to influence not just medical outcomes, but also public perception and family dynamics. And for Meghan, the awareness of all these intersecting pressures was almost as consuming as the physical struggle she was enduring. As hours turned into a day, a sense of urgency began to mount. Early morning reports hinted at a development so unexpected that advisors and medical personnel alike scrambled to respond. Specialists arrived with haste, emergency protocols were re-examined, and the room that had once seemed orderly now thrummed with tension and calculated chaos. For observers, it was a moment that seemed ripped from a drama. High-stakes decisions, human vulnerability, and the watchful eyes of a global audience all converging in real time. And yet, even in the midst of fear and uncertainty, moments of human connection persisted. A hand resting briefly on her shoulder. A reassuring word from a nurse who understood not just her medical needs, but her emotional state. These moments, though fleeting, offered glimpses of hope, fragile, tentative, yet undeniably powerful. They reminded everyone that even amidst chaos, compassion and empathy remain potent forces, capable of shaping both experience and outcome. But just as some semblance of stabilization seemed possible, new information arrived that changed everything. A previously unknown factor in her condition, a sudden shift in vital signs, or a complication that had gone unnoticed until now. Whatever it was, it created an immediate sense of alarm. The doctors acted quickly, staff moved with urgency, and the palace braced itself for a wave of implications that extended far beyond the hospital walls. Every second counted, and the world was unknowingly watching, poised for the next revelation. And then, the unthinkable. An unexpected intervention, a decision so critical that it could alter the course of events entirely. Within moments, the room shifted from tense anticipation to high-stakes action, a whirlwind of medical expertise, rapid assessment, and human emotion converging in a way that few could have anticipated. For Meghan, it was a pivotal juncture, one that tested her strength, resilience, and the intricate support network that had been mobilized in her defense. But just as it seemed that clarity might emerge, a new twist loomed, one that would challenge assumptions, redefine the stakes, and set the stage for developments that no one outside those hospital walls could predict. The night had fallen over London, casting long shadows across the streets and palace grounds. Outside the hospital, the city moved on with its usual rhythm, unaware of the storm unfolding behind the sterile walls of Meghan Markle's hospital room. Inside, however, time seemed suspended, each second stretching into eternity. The soft beeping of monitors, the hiss of oxygen, the low murmur of medical staff. These were the only constants in a world suddenly stripped of normalcy. For Meghan, every breath felt heavier, every thought sharper, every heartbeat a reminder that her life had shifted from the predictable to the perilous in mere hours. Imagine being in that bed. Stripped of privacy, stripped of autonomy, surrounded by professionals whose every decision carries immense weight. It is a scenario that transforms the mind, forcing one to confront vulnerability on a scale few experience. Meghan had spent years navigating public scrutiny, controlling narratives, and projecting strength. Now, that strength was being tested in a raw, unfiltered environment where every small action could have monumental consequences. How does a person reconcile the life they've led with a situation that demands complete surrender to forces beyond their control? Early evening had brought whispers of possible complications, subtle changes in vitals, irregular readings, questions that required urgent consultation with specialists. The medical team moved swiftly, coordinating care with precision and urgency, their movements a delicate ballet of experience, knowledge, and high-stakes decision-making. Yet even as they worked, the human element could not be ignored. There was concern in every glance, tension in every gesture, empathy hidden behind professional composure. For Meghan, this combination of technical expertise and human emotion was both comforting and overwhelming. Meanwhile, the palace remained a hive of calculated activity. Advisors, aides, and family members coordinated behind closed doors, ensuring that communication with the public was strategic and carefully measured. They drafted statements, prepared potential responses to inquiries, and monitored media coverage with vigilance. Every word, every gesture, every hint of information could be amplified beyond control. The monarchy's decades-long mastery of public relations was being tested like never before, as a deeply personal crisis intersected with global scrutiny. And Harry's presence was undeniable. Known for his loyalty and fierce protection of Meghan, he navigated a landscape filled with conflicting pressures. Supporting a loved one in crisis while under public observation is an extraordinary challenge, one that demands emotional fortitude, decisiveness, and courage. Every interaction, every choice, and every reaction had consequences. He had to balance concern, strategy, and presence, ensuring that Meghan received the care she needed while also managing the optics of the situation for a global audience. How does one navigate love, responsibility, and the weight of public expectation simultaneously? The media frenzy only heightened the tension. Social media erupted with speculation, headlines splintered into fragments of truth and conjecture, and fan communities mobilized in waves of hope, fear, and anxiety. News networks interrupted regular programming to cover every update, whether verified or not. It was a chaotic symphony of concern and misinformation, a reminder of how fame magnifies vulnerability. For Meghan, this meant that every private struggle was filtered through a lens of scrutiny, leaving no room for quiet recovery or reflection. Inside the hospital, subtle yet significant events began to unfold. Medical staff observed patterns that required immediate attention. Minor shifts in oxygen saturation, unexpected reactions to treatment, and subtle indicators that hinted at a more complex underlying issue. Decisions had to be made quickly, with full awareness that the margin for error was narrow. In moments like this, the technical aspects of medicine are inseparable from the human dimension. Every adjustment, every measurement, every intervention carries weight not just for physical survival, but for emotional reassurance. Simultaneously, palace aides and family members grappled with the tension between privacy and public communication. Traditionally, the royal family carefully controls the timing and content of announcements. Yet in this unprecedented situation, information leaked faster than planned, forcing rapid recalibration. Each statement had to reassure the public without revealing sensitive medical details, maintain dignity while addressing concern, and uphold the monarchy's image while acknowledging a genuine human crisis. The stakes were enormous, and missteps could trigger backlash, panic, or scandal. The psychological weight on Meghan cannot be overstated. Even the most composed individual experiences an acute vulnerability in a life-or-death scenario. Thoughts spiral, fear intensifies, and hope becomes simultaneously fragile and essential. In her case, compounded by years of public attention and scrutiny, the challenge was uniquely profound. She had become an emblem of resilience. Yet here she faced the ultimate test of that resilience, under circumstances she could neither fully predict nor control. And as the night deepened, an unexpected complication arose. A subtle but alarming indicator that prompted the medical team to act immediately. Specialists were summoned, equipment recalibrated, and every resource mobilized to address the sudden shift. The calm of earlier hours gave way to controlled urgency, each professional acutely aware that seconds mattered. Outside, the palace monitored updates with tense attention, readying themselves for announcements, responses, and contingency planning. Harry, observing from the periphery, faced an agonizing combination of fear and responsibility. His instinct was to remain by Meghan's side, offering reassurance, comfort, and strength. Yet every moment he spent there was a moment scrutinized by a watchful world. The balance between private concern and public duty had never been more acute. His decisions, measured and unmeasured alike, carried consequences not just for the immediate situation, but for the broader narrative surrounding Meghan's life and the royal family's image. In the midst of this storm, fleeting moments of clarity and connection shone through. A hand lightly resting on hers, a whispered reassurance, a shared glance that conveyed understanding without words. These are the human threads that provide solace amid chaos, the small gestures that anchor a person when circumstances feel uncontrollable. For Meghan, these moments were lifelines, reminders that despite uncertainty and vulnerability, she was not entirely alone. Yet even as the night wore on, tension escalated. Early morning would bring new assessments, more tests, and decisions that could redefine the course of events entirely. The combination of medical complexity, palace coordination, and global attention created an unprecedented convergence of stakes. Every heartbeat, every decision, and every whispered observation mattered, for her survival, for the public perception, and for the future of narratives long in the making. And then, just as a fragile calm seemed to settle, a new development emerged, one that no one had anticipated, one that threatened to upend the careful balance that had been achieved. The monitor beeped a rhythm that was both alarming and enigmatic, prompting immediate consultation and sparking questions that reached far beyond the hospital walls. The implications were enormous, and the world, still largely in the dark, was about to be jolted into an even deeper state of suspense. But what came next would shock even those closest to her, and it would set in motion a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The morning light filtered weakly through the hospital blinds, casting long, uncertain shadows across the room where Meghan lay. Each ray of light seemed to emphasize the tension in the space, a contrast between the outside world's calm morning and the storm raging within those walls. For the medical team, the new day brought renewed urgency. Subtle fluctuations in her vitals overnight had raised concerns, prompting a flurry of consultations and urgent reassessments. And for Meghan, even amid groggy exhaustion, awareness of the stakes pressed upon her like a weight she could neither escape nor control. Imagine being awake in that bed, aware that a sudden shift in your condition could ripple outward, affecting not just your immediate survival, but the entire narrative surrounding you. For someone who had spent years carefully managing public perception, this loss of control was unprecedented. How do you reconcile the desire for privacy with the inevitability of global attention? How do you maintain composure when every decision made on your behalf has consequences that extend far beyond the hospital room? These are questions that Meghan faced in real time, each one layered with emotional and psychological weight. The first reports of the morning were cautiously optimistic, yet layered with complexity. While her oxygen levels had stabilized slightly, new anomalies had emerged. Specialists debated potential courses of action, weighing risks and benefits under intense pressure. The stakes could not have been higher. Every choice, from medication adjustments to monitoring protocols, carried the potential to dramatically alter outcomes. For the medical team, the scenario demanded not only clinical expertise, but the ability to navigate uncertainty with precision and care. Meanwhile, the palace was already in motion. Advisors convened in urgent meetings, discussing strategy for communications, potential public statements, and ways to manage global curiosity without compromising patient privacy. Every message required careful wording, a delicate balance of reassurance and discretion, of transparency and control. In many ways, the crisis had become a multidimensional challenge, encompassing not just medical realities but centuries of tradition, media management, and the intricate dynamics of royal perception. And Harry's role remained intensely personal, yet acutely scrutinized. He had spent the night alternating between moments of quiet reflection and proactive coordination, ensuring that Meghan's care was prioritized while simultaneously engaging with advisors and staff to manage the optics of the situation. The tension between private loyalty and public responsibility had never been more pronounced. Every word he spoke, every decision he made, was imbued with layers of consequence. How does one navigate love, duty, and global attention simultaneously without losing composure? For Harry, it was a question with no easy answer. As the morning progressed, a subtle yet critical development emerged, an unexpected response to treatment that required immediate intervention. Nurses and specialists acted swiftly, their movements precise and urgent, each step choreographed to optimize her care. The room hummed with activity, a tense ballet of focus and skill. And in that moment, the human dimension of care became strikingly evident. Despite the advanced technology, the clinical expertise, and the strategic coordination, what mattered most was connection, the ability to respond with empathy, attentiveness, and decisiveness in the face of uncertainty. The public, however, remained largely in the dark. Social media and news outlets were alive with speculation, ranging from well-intentioned concern to wild conjecture. Images of hospitals, oxygen tanks, and medical equipment circulated, often accompanied by misleading captions or unverified claims. The combination of limited information and global curiosity created a volatile landscape, one in which misinformation could spread faster than facts. For Meghan and those closest to her, this was an additional layer of stress, navigating a world eager for answers while maintaining control over what could be revealed. At the same time, subtle interpersonal dynamics within the palace intensified. Advisors debated messaging strategies, family members weighed in on private communications, and tensions simmered beneath the surface. Each decision carried both immediate and long-term implications, impacting not only Meghan's well-being, but also the public perception of the royal family. These interactions, often invisible to the public eye, were as critical to the unfolding narrative as the medical interventions themselves. In the hospital, moments of vulnerability were interspersed with flashes of resilience. Meghan, despite exhaustion and discomfort, demonstrated remarkable composure, responding to care with quiet determination. A nurse's gentle touch, a doctor's reassuring words, the presence of Harry nearby, all served as anchors in an otherwise unpredictable scenario. These moments, though small, highlighted a fundamental truth. Even in crisis, human strength can manifest in subtle, profoundly impactful ways. By mid-morning, the situation had escalated further. A critical lab result required urgent analysis, and new consultations were initiated to reassess her treatment plan. The room, once a space of controlled calm, now hummed with focused intensity. Every action, every decision, carried enormous weight. The ripple effects extended beyond the hospital. Advisors continued to coordinate palace communications, media outlets adjusted their coverage in anticipation of new statements, and fans around the world watched anxiously, unsure of what was true and what was speculation. Meanwhile, Harry faced yet another challenge, managing the delicate balance between presence and strategic distance. He needed to be there for Meghan, to offer support and reassurance, while simultaneously ensuring that external communications, logistical coordination, and sensitive decision-making remained intact. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. Each choice had consequences, each movement was observed, and each interaction contributed to a broader narrative that extended far beyond the hospital room. And just when it seemed that some equilibrium might be restored, a sudden complication arose. A minor but significant shift in her vitals triggered immediate action from the medical team. Equipment was recalibrated, interventions were adjusted, and the atmosphere, already tense, intensified further. The scenario had become a high-stakes balancing act. The convergence of medical urgency, personal concern, and global scrutiny reached a peak that demanded unwavering focus from everyone involved. Even in the midst of this intensity, moments of human connection persisted. A gentle hand on hers, a reassuring glance, a whispered word of encouragement. These gestures underscored the profound interplay between technical care and emotional support. They reminded all present that crisis is not only defined by clinical precision, but also by empathy, compassion, and shared humanity. And then, just as hope seemed to flicker into the room, a new development emerged. One that would challenge assumptions, redefine expectations, and push the unfolding story into uncharted territory. Every observer, from the medical team to the royal family, knew that the next moments would be decisive. And for the world outside, still unaware of the magnitude of what was unfolding, the suspense was about to reach a dramatic crescendo. But what came next would shock even the closest confidants, and the ramifications would ripple far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The afternoon sun cast long streaks of light across the hospital floor, yet the warmth of the day seemed almost ironic in contrast to the tension inside Meghan's room. Each flicker of sunlight was a silent reminder that the world outside moved on, oblivious to the high-stakes drama unfolding behind closed doors. Within that space, every sound was magnified, the soft hiss of oxygen, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, the occasional murmur of medical staff coordinating care. And at the center of it all lay Meghan, struggling, yet demonstrating a quiet, fierce resilience that defined her entire public life. From the moment she was admitted, the fragility of her situation became undeniable. For someone accustomed to maintaining control over every aspect of her life, this environment was both physically and psychologically disorienting. The sterile room, the constant monitoring, the dependence on others for even the smallest of tasks. It was a stark reminder of vulnerability. But vulnerability, paradoxically, also revealed strength. It was here, in the intersection of fear and determination, that Meghan's courage became most palpable. The medical team was working in seamless coordination, yet the pressure was immense. Early readings had stabilized, but anomalies persisted, requiring continuous vigilance. Every adjustment to medication, every calibration of equipment, every minute of monitoring could tip the balance between progress and regression. For the doctors and nurses, there was no room for error. For Meghan, there was no escape from the reality of her condition. And for Harry, the weight of responsibility pressed more heavily than ever. He had spent the morning coordinating, advocating, and supporting, Yet nothing could shield him from the emotional toll of seeing the woman he loved so vulnerable. As news of her hospitalization spread through palace channels, the family's inner dynamics began to strain under the weight of urgency and uncertainty. Advisors debated the timing and content of communications, balancing the need for transparency with the imperative of protecting Meghan's privacy. Family members weighed in, offering guidance, support, and occasionally conflicting opinions. Every decision carried consequences, both immediate and far-reaching, shaping not just the unfolding medical response but the broader public perception. The monarchy had faced crises before, but the intersection of personal vulnerability, global scrutiny, and public fascination created a scenario of unprecedented complexity. Outside the hospital walls, media coverage intensified. News networks dissected every report, social media exploded with speculation, and fans and commentators shared a mixture of concern, conspiracy, and hope. The challenge for those inside was immense. How to navigate an environment where every word and every gesture could be interpreted, amplified, or distorted. For Meghan, this meant existing in a space where privacy was fragile, control was limited, and perception could be as critical as physical health. Inside the room, small moments of human care took on extraordinary significance. A nurse's gentle touch, a doctor's focused attention, a whispered word of encouragement. These actions, often overlooked in ordinary life, became anchors amid chaos. They reminded Meghan, and everyone present, that even in the most technical and high-stakes scenarios, empathy and connection are essential. It is a truth that resonates universally. In moments of crisis, humanity is as vital as skill. But just as some stability seemed to emerge, a new complication arose. A subtle shift in oxygen saturation prompted urgent reassessment. The medical team responded instantly, adjusting equipment, administering treatment, and reevaluating her condition with the precision of seasoned professionals. The atmosphere, already charged with tension, intensified further. For Harry, every second carried an emotional weight, a reminder of the precarious balance between hope and fear. He stayed close, offering reassurance with quiet words, knowing that presence itself could provide comfort even when he could not control the outcome. Meanwhile, the palace was engaged in an intricate dance of messaging and perception management. Advisors drafted potential statements, prepared for media inquiries, and monitored public reaction with relentless attention. Each decision was layered, conveying concern without panic, providing updates without violating privacy, and maintaining the dignity of the family while responding to a situation that was both intensely personal and publicly scrutinized. The stakes could not have been higher. Amid the technical interventions and strategic planning, Meghan's inner world remained complex and charged. Thoughts raced, concern for her children, for Harry, for the public perception, and for herself. How would the world perceive her in this vulnerable moment? How would Harry manage the intersection of his own emotional experience with the necessity of action and coordination? How do you navigate love, fear, and duty when every heartbeat feels consequential? These questions, unspoken yet ever-present, defined the emotional landscape of the afternoon. As hours passed, subtle shifts in her condition prompted the arrival of additional specialists. Consultants joined the team, offering expertise and reviewing treatment strategies with meticulous care. The hospital room, already a hub of quiet intensity, now thrummed with a heightened sense of purpose and urgency. Every decision, every adjustment, and every observation mattered more than usual, because the convergence of personal, medical, and public stakes had reached a critical peak. And yet, even amid this whirlwind of activity, moments of human connection persisted. Harry's hand on hers, a nurse's gentle reassurance, a doctor's encouraging words. These small gestures carried profound significance. They were reminders that, even in high-pressure, technical scenarios, empathy and compassion are indispensable. In crisis, the human element is not secondary, it is central. But just as hope seemed to gain a foothold, a sudden, unexpected shift occurred. A new complication, subtle yet alarming, that instantly changed the dynamics of the room. Equipment alarms, hurried consultations, rapid adjustments. The calm that had been tenuously achieved evaporated. Every professional in the room understood the gravity of the moment, and outside, the palace braced for the next wave of decisions, communications, and emotional upheaval. And for Harry and Meghan, the reality was undeniable. Their world had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. The stakes, once high, had become extraordinary, and the next moments promised developments that no one could anticipate or control. But what came next would redefine everything, and no one, not even the closest confidants, was prepared for what was about to unfold. The hospital lights had dimmed to a softer glow by evening, yet the intensity within Meghan's room showed no sign of abating. Every monitor beep, every adjustment to the oxygen flow, every quiet exchange between medical staff was a reminder that her situation remained fragile. For those observing from the outside, the world appeared calm. The streets of London hummed with ordinary life, oblivious to the storm raging within these walls. But inside, every second carried weight, and every action had the potential to shift the balance between hope and despair. Imagine the psychological strain. Lying in a hospital bed, dependent entirely on others for your survival, while aware that millions of eyes are metaphorically trained on you. For Meghan, a woman who had spent years controlling public perception and managing high-stakes situations, this loss of control was profound. The oxygen mask covering her face was both a literal and symbolic reminder of vulnerability. How do you confront fear when every breath feels like a negotiation between life and uncertainty? How do you reconcile private suffering with public expectation? These questions loomed over her, pressing silently yet insistently against the confines of her consciousness. Throughout the day, subtle shifts in her condition demanded heightened attention. Minor fluctuations in vital signs prompted rapid consultations and adjustments in care. Every member of the medical team moved with a mix of technical precision and emotional awareness, knowing that while the science of medicine is exacting, the human element is just as critical. Their every action, gesture, and word was a lifeline, a bridge between vulnerability and recovery, between fear and reassurance. Meanwhile, the palace operated like a well-oiled, highly sensitive machine. Advisors coordinated messaging, ensuring that any public statement would balance transparency with privacy. Family members debated approaches, weighing the emotional needs of those closest to Meghan against the strategic necessity of protecting her image and the broader perception of the monarchy. The pressure was immense. Every misstep, no matter how small, had the potential to trigger public criticism, media speculation, or personal anguish. The crisis had become a multidimensional chess game, with stakes as personal as they were global. Harry's role continued to be intensely demanding. Beyond the emotional toll of seeing Meghan vulnerable, he had to navigate the logistical, strategic, and relational complexities of the crisis. His presence in the room was both a source of comfort and a symbol to the world: loyalty, love, and the unwavering commitment to support her. Yet even as he offered reassurance, his own fears and anxieties were unrelenting. Every glance at the monitors, every consultation with staff, every whispered discussion carried the weight of potential outcomes, both hopeful and dire. The public remained captivated, hungry for updates yet constrained by the scarcity of verified information. Social media feeds buzzed with speculation, ranging from deeply empathetic support to conspiracy-laden conjecture. News outlets attempted to fill gaps with commentary, analysis, and sometimes misinformation. For those inside the hospital, managing this information landscape was as challenging as attending to the immediate medical needs of the patient. Every statement, every leak, every rumor had implications far beyond the immediate context. Inside the hospital room, moments of vulnerability were punctuated by glimpses of resilience. Meghan, despite her exhaustion, displayed a quiet determination. She responded to care with small gestures, a nod, a squeezed hand, a faint smile, that communicated strength without words. In these moments, the intersection of human emotion and medical precision was most apparent. The empathy of the staff, the steadfast presence of Harry, and Meghan's own courage created a fragile yet undeniable web of support that sustained her through each passing hour. As evening deepened, a subtle but significant development emerged. A minor irregularity in her vitals prompted the arrival of additional specialists. Their presence added a new layer of intensity to the room. Rapid consultations ensued, medical equipment was recalibrated, and treatment strategies were revisited with fresh urgency. The delicate equilibrium that had been maintained throughout the day teetered once again, reminding everyone that in situations like this, certainty is fleeting and every decision carries profound consequences. The palace, in parallel, adjusted to the evolving scenario with a blend of caution and urgency. Advisors reviewed contingency plans, prepared for potential public disclosures, and coordinated with staff to manage both internal and external communications. Each action was meticulously considered: how much to reveal, when to reveal it, and what impact each message might have on public perception. The balancing act was delicate and relentless. A single misstep could reverberate through social media, news outlets, and international discourse with unforeseen consequences. Throughout the room, small gestures continued to carry immense significance. Harry's hand remained close, a silent reminder of support. Nurses offered words of reassurance, their tones calibrated to instill calm while conveying the seriousness of the situation. Doctors moved with precise intention, every decision informed by both clinical evidence and situational awareness. In this intersection of science, care, and emotion, the human drama of the crisis unfolded fully, revealing layers of vulnerability, courage, and interdependence that few outside the room could appreciate. Then, just as a fragile calm seemed to settle, a sudden and unexpected complication occurred. Monitors beeped urgently, alarms sounded, and the room erupted into coordinated action. Specialists moved quickly, adjusting treatment protocols and reassessing her condition with meticulous precision. The intensity, already high, reached a new peak. For Harry, the tension was almost unbearable. For the palace, it was a test of crisis management on multiple levels. For the medical team, it was a call to execute their expertise under pressure with extraordinary focus. And yet, amid the chaos, a single truth became clear: moments of connection, empathy, and presence were as vital as any medical intervention. A gentle touch, a reassuring word, a shared glance. These became lifelines, offering stability in a sea of uncertainty. Meghan's resilience, combined with the steadfast support of those around her, formed the backbone of her survival in this critical juncture. But just when the crisis seemed to reach a pivotal turning point, the unexpected struck once more, a revelation that no one anticipated, one that would send shockwaves through the palace, the medical team, and the global audience alike. Every assumption was about to be challenged, every expectation upended, and every narrative reconsidered. The next moments would change everything, and no one, not even those closest to Meghan, was prepared for what was about to happen. By late evening, the hospital room had taken on an almost surreal atmosphere. The harsh fluorescent lights had softened into a dim glow, yet the intensity of activity inside remained unchanged. Every monitor beep, every hiss of oxygen, every quiet murmur of the staff resonated with significance. For Meghan, lying on that bed, the day's events had been a relentless test of endurance, strength, and resilience. Each shallow breath reminded her that life had suddenly become fragile in a way that no public appearance or carefully managed statement could ever convey. The morning had brought cautious optimism, yet it had quickly given way to mounting complexity. Minor anomalies in her vitals had prompted rapid interventions, consultations with specialists, and meticulous adjustments to treatment protocols. The medical team moved with precision, their professionalism tempered by empathy. Every action, every decision, carried immense weight, not just for her physical health, but for the emotional well-being of those around her. And at the center of this storm was Meghan, navigating fear, uncertainty, and the relentless reality of dependence in a world where she had spent most of her adult life in command. Imagine the psychological toll. The feeling of being trapped between vulnerability and expectation, of relying entirely on others for survival, while the eyes of the world lingered, metaphorically, upon you. Meghan's life, previously defined by agency and control, had been reduced to a sequence of small, critical moments, each one a delicate negotiation between strength and fragility. How do you maintain composure when every breath, every heartbeat, and every medical intervention carries global significance? How do you reconcile the personal struggle of illness with the unrelenting scrutiny of the public eye? These were the questions haunting her in that quiet, charged room. Meanwhile, the palace remained in a state of heightened vigilance. Advisors and staff worked tirelessly to monitor developments, coordinate communications, and prepare contingency strategies. Every decision had to balance discretion with transparency, concern with strategy, and compassion with calculated messaging. The stakes were enormous. A single misstep could result in media frenzy, public backlash, or misinterpretation of sensitive information. In this crucible of urgency, long-standing protocols were tested against the unpredictable dynamics of a crisis that was intensely personal, yet globally consequential. Harry, too, faced a profound and relentless challenge. His loyalty and dedication to Meghan demanded his full attention, yet he had to navigate the intersection of personal emotion, logistical coordination, and public expectation. He remained a steadfast presence at her side, offering reassurance, comfort, and quiet encouragement, even as his own anxiety simmered beneath the surface. Every decision he made, from small gestures of care to interactions with advisors and staff, had far-reaching implications. He was both a partner and a guardian, balancing love, responsibility, and the pressure of a global audience in real time. As the evening deepened, subtle but significant shifts in Meghan's condition prompted rapid reassessment. The medical team identified a delicate complication requiring immediate attention. Specialists arrived, equipment was adjusted, and the room became a hive of focused activity. The intensity was palpable, yet beneath it all, a layer of human connection persisted. The gentle touch of a hand, the reassuring words of a nurse, the quiet presence of a devoted husband. These moments, seemingly small, carried enormous emotional weight, reminding everyone present that empathy is as crucial as clinical precision in navigating a life-threatening crisis. Outside, the world remained largely unaware of the full extent of the drama unfolding within the hospital. Social media buzzed with speculation, and news outlets scrambled to provide updates based on limited information. Public curiosity was insatiable, yet often distorted by incomplete or inaccurate reports. For those inside, the challenge was twofold: attending to the immediate medical needs of Meghan while simultaneously managing a communication landscape where perception could quickly overshadow reality.